Thank you, David, for giving me the opportunity to introduce Dr. Brian A. Gerrard. In fact, I know Dr. Brian Gerrard personally. From 2019, I've been working with him, and I came to know a lot about his versatile personality, his creativity, his engagement, involvement in various welfare, well-being activities for children and youth. So I give a brief account of his activities. Brian has a PhD in sociology from the University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia, and a PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Toronto. He has extensive experience teaching a wide variety of master's and doctoral level courses in counseling psychology and higher education, and holds teaching awards from 2 universities. Brian is an emeritus faculty member of the University of San Francisco, where he developed the master's program on MFT, and for 14 years served as MFT coordinator. His orientation emphasizes on integration of family system and problem-solving approaches. He is former chair of the University of San Francisco Counseling Psychology Department. Currently, Brian is the chief for the Western Institute for Social Research in Berkeley, California, which is globally well known for its quality research work. He is a member of board Center for Child and Family Development at WISR. The center, co-founded by Brian, has for years managed the largest, longest running school-based family counseling program of its type in the USA. Its Mission Possible program has served more than 20,000 children and families in over 70 Bay Area schools. Brian is also chair of the Institute for School-Based Family Counseling and Symposium Director for the Oxford Symposium in School-Based Family Counseling. He is the senior author of several books on school-based family counseling. During the 2020 pandemic, he was actively involved in co-leading the Disaster Global Volunteer Team, which developed 26 different language translation of the book titled Disaster Shock: How to Cope with the Emotional Stress of a Major Disaster, which are available free on the disastershock.com. Brian lives in Stuart, Florida with his wife, Oliver Paul. I would like to share a few words, personal experience in working with Brian. That one thing is that recently we jointly published a book titled Handbook of Health and Wellbeing, Challenges, Strategies, Future Trends by Springer. It is published online just 7 days back. Within 7 days, about 500 copies are downloaded globally. In addition, Brian is working on 3-4 other books with other co-author, and he has given me the opportunity to become a co-author of his another book on school-based family counseling in disaster and crisis, on which we are working. Brian is very young person. He's about 84 or 85. Brian, am I correct?
No. Yeah. 75, but I guess I look
75. So 75 aged youth are with us. And at this age, how much of workload one can take, how much of passion he has for academic, how much of passion he has for addressing issues and challenges which is affecting global population. Whenever there is a disaster crisis in any part of the world, Brian immediately come forward and think of how to help that community, mobilizing his network of other people. I think his humanity is an example before us. He is an inspiration for us to think of doing more and more academic work. Brian, I tell you, in general, in our country, after retirement, 60, 65, people think that my journey is over. Now I need to take rest. But you are an example before us that life is a full journey of academic work to do something for others. And that is the last component of WHO definition of mental health, a person's contribution to the neighboring community. As long as we are alive, as long as we are active, as long as our mental health, cognitive functioning, physical health permits, you are the best role model for me. And I had the opportunity to meet Brian in Oxford Symposium in Bristol-East College, where he inspired, motivated like me, like anything. And next time he asked that, Shivnath, your deliberation, one aspect you shared that intervention program for rehabilitating children of commercial sex worker. We want to listen to you more. Can you deliver a keynote address? I did not know this topic will attract him, all the board members of Institute for School-Based Family Counseling. It was an honor for me to share and narrate that experience, which did not get that much of attention in my country, of 5 years intervention program. But to global committee, that was an important program to mobilize and rehabilitate children, especially children from marginalized community. And that was fascinating for me. I will not spend much more because we are all eagerly waiting to listen to you, Brian. So once again, pranam to you, Brian, for accepting our invitation. From entire RGNIYD committee, from NIT Uttarakhand, and from UN volunteers, we all welcome you for your deliberation. Thank you, Brian.
I'm going to talk now for about 30 minutes about promoting youth development through school-based family counseling. I want you to imagine that you are the parent of a 15-year-old youth, and one day you receive the following phone call from your child's school mental health professional. Hello, I'm calling about your child who has been having some challenges at school. We think that your child is having psychological problems related to your family. I can make a referral for you to a nearby mental health clinic where your child and your family can receive psychotherapy. I'd like you to take a moment and think about what thoughts and feelings you might have as a parent if you received a phone call like that. And now I want you to consider what you would think and feel as a parent if you received a phone call like this about your youth. Hello, I'm calling about your child who's been having some challenges at school. Would you be willing to meet with me in order to develop a plan to help your child do better at school? You know your child better than I do, and having the benefit of your wisdom as parents would be of the greatest help to me. That's a very different way of contacting a parent. The first approach is more in line with what is called a traditional school mental health approach. But the second approach is very consistent with what I call a school-based family counseling approach. And this is the subject of my address today. School-based family counseling is an approach that looks at children and youth from the point of view of the two most important social institutions that affect them, school and family. Here's a definition of school-based family counseling. It's an integrated approach, that's very important, integrated approach to mental health intervention that focuses on both school and family in order to help children and youth overcome personal problems and succeed academically. So it's a linkage of mental health interventions in schools with mental health interventions with families in order to promote school success. There's a very strong emphasis in the approach on school success, academic success, whether it's at the tertiary level or the secondary or the primary level. Many of you will be familiar with ecological systems theory developed by Yuri Bronfenbrenner. And in his systems theory, in the microsystem, family and school are the areas where we're going to be looking at in school-based family counseling. The definition of youth by the United Nations is ages 15 to 24. And youth, children, as we look at youth, children are important because children become youth. And in thinking about mental health intervention, we need to think about both children and youth because it's preventive when you work with children. School-based family counseling relates to both children and youth, particularly at the primary and secondary and the beginning of the tertiary levels of education. The professionals who typically carry out school-based family counseling are these. They're all the different mental health professions: counselors, psychologists, social workers, family therapists, and so forth. In addition, special education teachers and regular teachers perform some school-based family counseling functions, particularly in schools that don't have mental health counselors. The origins of school-based family counseling go back to the early 1900s with Alfred Adler, who was the first school-based family counselor. He was an Austrian psychiatrist. He was the founder of what is called the individual psychology approach, which, in contrast to the Freudian approach, placed a very strong emphasis on children and youth developing what he called social interest in others, in helping others, and collaborating with others. And he worked closely with schools and with families. In the 1920s, he developed 28 guidance clinics throughout the city of Vienna, and each of these was attached to a school. And at these schools, he would do demonstrations of how to interview a child and a teacher and a parent in front of parents and teachers so that they could all learn his approach to promoting social interest in children and families. This is one of his favorite quotes, that psychology and education are two phases of the same reality and the same problem. These are two books that were developed by Rudolf Dreikurs, who was a psychiatrist and a follower of Adler. Discipline Without Tears is a book for parents. Maintaining Sanity in the Classroom is a book for teachers. This shows the early emphasis of the Adlerians on school-based family counseling, working with schools and working with families in an integrated approach. This is a quote that I think nicely summarizes. And it says, "The problems in the schools are but a reflection of the problems in society. The solution to those problems lies in understanding the systemic nature and interdependence of schools, families, and communities." So let's look now at the traditional school mental health intervention approach. This typically involves academic counseling, the use of guidance groups in the classroom, helping children to develop psychosocial skills, and individual counseling and therapy for youth who are having personal problems, generally those that show up at school. The traditional family mental health intervention approach is different. It involves what is called conjoint family counseling therapy, where the counselor sees the entire family together to talk about what is happening in the family. Couples counseling and therapy, and parent consultation. In school-based family counseling, all of these mental health skills are put together. And the school-based family practitioner, who may come from any one of the mental health disciplines, attempts to link these together in order to provide the best possible care for youth. So when we look at common school problems, here are some of the most common ones. Poor grades, problems with peers, conflict with teacher, bullying, very common now globally. But youth are affected also by family problems, divorce, marital conflict, child abuse, economic stress, sibling rivalry, ineffective parenting. The school problems affect family problems, and youth may have school problems, which they bring home and they're stressed, or they may have family problems, which they bring to school and cause stress there. This is a bar chart taken some years ago in San Francisco, where we worked with 20 different schools. And it's a summary of some of the common problems that the children that we worked with, mostly in primary schools, were having. And you can see on the right-hand, probably the left-hand side, bullying and harassment, difficulty with peers, playground behavior problems, classroom behavior problems, underachieving, poor grades. These are the typical problems that children and youth have in schools. Over here, we have death of a family member or friend. There are 25 children that experienced that. That was quite a high number for that particular year. But over here on the right, we see the largest number of children in this sample had family problems. And what is important in the school-based family counseling approach is that we work to understand how the family problems and the school problems are linked together. We also see family as a valuable resource, not just a source of problems. There are grandparents and parents who have a lot of wisdom about how to live in the world. And there are uncles and aunts and cousins and distant family members who are valuable resources. Family loyalty, cohesion in the family is a source of tremendous strength and resilience to youth. And family members may have skills in different areas, such as a family member who is knowledgeable about how to get a job, or a family member who is knowledgeable about how to get along with other people and diffuse conflict. And so working with families, using the family as a resource to strengthen and empower youth is a very important part of this approach. The school-based family counseling meta model is a visual tool for conceptualizing the importance of focusing on school and family, which is the first axis, using a prevention focus and an intervention focus, which is the second axis. And this gives us 4 quadrants: school prevention, family prevention, school intervention, and family intervention. And within these areas, school prevention, this is where you might do a guidance group, where you, with the class, talk about ways of communicating effectively with each other. Classroom management refers to helping teachers to manage their class, and beginning teachers have trouble with that. Classroom meetings to discuss an issue that might be affecting everybody in the class, such as bullying. The use of student support groups to support students who are maybe dealing with bereavement, and stress management skills for helping to deal with the many stresses that we have. And of course, in the last 2 years, the COVID pandemic, and now the war in Ukraine. A lot of students are very stressed by these things. In intervention, we have some very traditional things: individual counseling, consultation with the teacher to help the teacher be more effective, and crisis intervention if there's a death in the school, if a student dies or a teacher, or maybe there's a school shooting, something like that. We have a lot of those in the United States here. Principal consultation, I've put at the top. Very important to consult with the principal, because you can't get into the school without the principal's support. Family prevention is where you do educational workshops to help parents understand things, and support groups, because often parents need support, particularly parents who have a child with a disability, or there may be other problems that the parents have. And finally, family intervention, where we see the traditional family intervention approaches of family counseling, parent consultation, and couples counseling. So all the mental health approaches can use that model. And I'm going to share with you now a hypothetical case study in school-based family counseling. So let us suppose we have two 15-year-olds at school. One is Vihan and the other is Adita. And they don't get along, and Adita has been bullying Vihan. So in a traditional school counseling intervention, the school mental health professional would look at this pair and maybe give counseling to either or both and try to resolve it at that level. In school-based family counseling, we become very interested in what's happening in the family of each of these youth. So we would look at the extended family, and I've only shown mother and father here, but there would be other family members. So in Adita's family, and this is a hypothetical case, Adita is not getting along with his mother and father. There's a lot of conflict there, and he brings his unhappiness to school and takes it out on others. Vihan, in his family, has a close relationship with his mother and a disengaged or not close relationship with his father, shown by this line that's broken in the middle. Then we would look at the school system. And in bullying, student bystanders are considered very important because they give tacit support to bullying. And so it's important to make an intervention with them. The teacher in this case is shown as not being terribly involved with Vihan, maybe not even aware of Vihan in her classroom. The student bystanders are also not strongly connected with the teacher, and the principal may not be clearly aware of what's going on in the classroom with this teacher or with the student bystanders. So all of this would suggest things that you would think about looking systemically at what is happening with these two youth. So to make an intervention, the way I would conceptualize that is that if I were working with this situation, I would do some individual counseling with Vihan and Adita. I would do consultation with the teacher and some classroom management. I would work with Vihan's family and Adita's family. I would consult with the principal and get permission to do classroom meetings with the teacher's class on the topic of bullying. I would do a guidance group with the entire school, talking about bullying and ways to stop bullying. And then I would do some parent education on helping the parents to understand what causes bullying and how it can be related, sometimes to things happening at home. And then I would sequence these interventions by starting with a school intervention, moving to a family intervention, then a school prevention, and then a family prevention. And so that's just one way of making an intervention. There are many different ways of delivering school-based family counseling programs. The yellow shows school-sited programs, which refers to programs where the counseling is done at the school. The purple shows community-sited programs, which means the counseling is done in the community agency. There are several strengths to school-based family counseling. The first is that it's a systems focus, and the idea of systems theory with families is that one part of the family affects all the other parts. And so if there is a lot of tension in the family for some reason, it can affect a youth. Here's a boy who is unhappy and making a rude gesture. And in a situation like this, we want to look systemically at family, community, peer, and school systems and think about how do we work with all of these different systems that are affecting this youth in order to help him or her do better at school and in life. The second strength of school-based family counseling is that it's strength-based. It has an educational focus rather than a therapy focus. And a lot of families feel there's a stigma to go to mental health counseling or therapy. A third strength is that school-based family counseling is a partnership with parents. we treat parents not as deficient, but as valuable resources that can help youth to do better. And so we collaborate with parents and empower them. School-based family counseling is also a multiculturally sensitive approach. And here we see a contrast between traditional psychotherapy and the school-based family counseling approach. Traditional psychotherapy has a pathology focus, whereas school-based family counseling has an educational focus. Traditional psychotherapy focuses on the individual, whereas school-based family counseling has a systems focus, focusing on the family and school. The family is often seen as interfering in traditional psychotherapy, whereas the family is seen as the positive resource in school-based family counseling. And therapy is only done at a clinic in traditional psychotherapy, whereas consultation is done at school in the school-based family counseling approach. So something important to note here is that school-based family counseling does not have what I call a Eurocentric focus. Professor Rakesh Chandra, a professor at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi, and his colleague, Dr. Sinha Akuzit at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, made this comment in a paper that they wrote. Unlike the Western society, which puts emphasis on individualism, the Indian society is collectivistic in that it promotes interdependence and cooperation, with the family forming the focal point of the social structure. They go on to say, application of Western psychotherapy, primarily focused on dynamic models, ego structure, and individuals, therefore becomes difficult in the Indian collectivist context. This is a very important point, which makes school-based family counseling a more applicable model to many different cultures. The fifth strength is the advocacy role that is given to children and youth. The client of the school-based family counseling practitioner is the youth, the school, and the family. But of those three, focusing and being an advocate for the youth and the child is the most important role. A sixth strength of school-based family counseling is that we feel that schools also need to change. And as you can see in these two pictures, one of a teacher with an angry look on her face, and the other of a teacher saying there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid students. Schools have to change too. And so school-based family practitioners are constantly thinking about what in the school needs to change to help youth do better. And the seventh strength of school-based family counseling is that it has evidence-based support. It has broad support across all the mental health disciplines. It has the strongest support in the school counseling literature, and it has moderate evidence-based support from randomized control group studies. And I will post my slides later so that any of you watching this presentation can have access to them. And these randomized control group studies have been done in the last 15 years, comparing a school intervention, a school and family intervention together with just a school intervention or just a family intervention. And when you combine the school and family together, you get a more powerful effect in helping youth. These are a few other studies that are in my 2008 article that's in the International Journal for School-Based Family Counseling, which you could find online. I've only gone down to F here alphabetically, and there are many more studies that are available. I'm going to close now discussing three school-based family counseling programs that I consider exemplary. The first program was developed in British Columbia in Canada, the second in San Francisco, and the third in the United Kingdom. In 1974, at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, I was a student, a master's student, and the chairperson there was Dr. John Friesen, chair of the Department of Educational Psychology. He received a $400,000 grant to build a family counseling center in a school in New Westminster. And New Westminster is shown over here. And this is Vancouver, and this is where Vancouver is in Canada, just to let you know where that is. And what he did was he put family counselors into that school counseling center. And that counseling center has been running for 40 years. It's still there, and it still has students from the University of British Columbia, and they work with teachers and students and families. The second program is one that I developed at the University of San Francisco, and I developed it in a center called the Center for Child and Family Development that Dr. Emily Gerrard and I developed together in order to do school-based family counseling. And we would place our family counseling students, we have a master's degree in family counseling, we would place our students in elementary and secondary schools throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. And this program was very popular. More than 20,000 children and families were served over about a 15-year period. More than 70 schools, public, Catholic, and private, participated. More than 600 interns were trained in school-based family counseling. And this program is the largest university schools partnership. This is a very inexpensive way to deliver school-based family counseling because the students are in training and the schools pay a very small fee in order to have the service. We've also generated about $2 million in grants and school fees to help support the program. The last program is called Place to Be. This is a program in England, Scotland, and Wales. It's in 600 schools, and it served more than 205,000 students. The funding for this program comes from a number of resources. This is funding information from 2016. They had 14 million pounds in funds, which is US 19 million or 145 million rupees from all these different sources. And this is a list of all the foundations and corporations that donated to this. In addition, they have a patron, which is the Duchess, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cambridge, which I think has helped them enormously with their fundraising. The challenges of school-based family counseling are the following. The first is that family mental health professionals really don't get any training in dealing with schools. They historically work in the community, and they need to understand school culture. And school mental health professionals historically don't get any training in how to work with families, and they need to understand family dynamics. And bridging that divide is very hard because of what I call silo training programs for the mental health professions. Each mental health profession operates pretty much independently of the other mental health professions, and there's often turf issues between the mental health professions. And there's a literature that very sadly describes how some of the mental health professions try to block the other mental health professions from operating in schools. Another challenge is that school administrators need to reconceptualize their role as facilitators of what are called trauma-sensitive schools. The trauma-sensitive school movement is one that encourages school administrators to have the teachers and the families connected with the students all develop more compassionate relationships with each other, because the research is very clear that large numbers of youth and children experience trauma, and it interferes with their learning, and it requires a more compassionate approach to the way people treat each other. And finally, program funding is something that is a challenge. So if you want to learn more about this, you can go online to a website for the Oxford Symposium in School-Based Family Counseling. This is where Dr. Deb and I first met, and this is Brasenose College, one of the oldest colleges at Oxford. We meet there, we try to meet there every year. We haven't been able to do that because of the pandemic, but we hope to be back next year. These are two books on school-based family counseling that I've been senior editor of, and there are additional resources that are attached to this presentation, which I will make available to Dr. Deb, and any of you who want to have copies of these slides may do so. This concludes my presentation.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. So I'm research scholar from Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development. I have done, like now my present research is on factors influencing academic dishonesty. I have done PG diploma in counseling and family therapy. So where I have done research on verbal expression of emotions of students with parents and teachers. So while doing that, like I met few students and all. Like when I'm listening to your keynote speech, like the basic assumptions of integrated family therapy, school integrated family therapy, basic assumptions are like parents are sensitive and have good understanding towards the problems of the child. Parents and family are capable of effective handling of the problems. Parents can spend good amount of time with the children. Parents know that how important it is to increase the knowledge on psychological perspective to address these kind of problems. But the touching reality is, in India, now there is a flip wherein which parents are busy making living and meeting the ends. So personality of the parent and like parents are not themselves not idealistic sometimes, and amount of resources that are they need to spend in this kind of therapies, motivation towards attending the therapy and participating in the therapy, and these things are addressed. So my doubt is like in your country, in your research, what are the strategies that you have used in order to motivate the parents involved in this kind of family therapy, and what are the that is one doubt, like what are the strategies you suggest like we can use. And the other one is like, may I ask the demographic characteristics, mainly economical conditions of the families that involved in your research?
Okay, what an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. I'll start with the demographics. Well, in San Francisco, the children that we work with the poorest schools in what are called the Mission District of San Francisco, where the students are mostly minority students, African American, Hispanic, strong multicultural backgrounds. We do not work, we only work with a few Caucasian students. We try to work with the students who are most at risk for failure in school. And we found the approach works very well with them. And the reason it works well is because the emphasis is not on therapy. The emphasis is on how can we help your child succeed in school? So we don't say to the parent, we think you need counseling. What we say to the parent is, we've noticed that your child at school is having some trouble with her grades, and we'd like to talk with you to learn more about how we can help your child, because you are experts on your child. And would you come in and meet with us and give us the benefit of your wisdom? So the approach is it's kind of a non-therapy approach, because the emphasis is on school success. And so in the course of meeting with the parents and talking with the child, the mother and father might begin to argue with each other. And mother might say, well, our son is I think our son is doing well at school and we don't even need to be here. And the father might say, no, you're absolutely wrong. look at his grades, particularly in science. They're not very good. And the parents will argue in front of the counselor. At that point, the counselor would say, well, I think we should talk about this because, you know, when parents disagree, it can affect how a child does at school. What do you think about that? Do you think that maybe you're not getting along with each other is affecting your child? And so the counseling topic is introduced, but it's always around the school success thing. And families tend to be very accepting of this. They don't feel like they're being pathologized or made deficient. And so that's my answer to your question.
Brian, her first question was, what are the strategies could be adopted to motivate parents to come forward to address mental health issues of children and youth?
What the way we do it in San Francisco is we ask our master's degree students who are school-based family counselors to go to a parent-teacher meeting where they meet the parents in the school and to explain what their role is, that their role is to promote school success. We find that's very helpful. We also encourage them to send a letter to the parents introducing themselves and explaining that they're there to promote school success. And so that educational focus tends to make parents feel accepted and valued. When I was a youth myself, I remember once a year, the school, the teacher would invite all the parents to come, and the parents would have like a 15-minute meeting with the teacher. And so that's kind of an old traditional model for making contact and friends with parents. But we know from research that parent engagement is a tremendously important thing in youth success at school. In fact, it's as important and possibly more important than what happens at the school. If the parents are involved with the education of the youth tends to want to be involved with it. And so it's important that teachers make friends with parents and relate to them in a way that treats them with respect. So one way a teacher can do that is to occasionally send notes home, congratulating the parents on something the child or youth has done at school. And so you build up a relationship between the school and the family, and the school-based family practitioner facilitates that. Their role is a facilitator in the school. But in some schools where there are no mental health school personnel, teachers can facilitate this approach as well.